Good morning. My name is Dr. Larry Milner, and I'm here today to discuss and introduce my series of books which has recently been published by Mazo Publishing in Jerusalem under what I call the effect of the Exodus on the ancient world. It's a trilogy of novels and an academic treatise, and my intent in this series of books and lectures, hopefully, which will follow, is to explain, number one, that the Exodus took place, and number two, that it affected not only the Jewish religion, but also ancient Egypt and ancient Greece as well. It has become fashionable in recent years to claim that the Exodus never took place, that it was a fictional event raised by rabbis who were attempting to give the Jews the right of ownership in the Promised Land. This is not something only brought up by anti-Semitic scholars, but actually some modern rabbis and even skeptical historians bothered by the lack of any archaeologic foundations for the reality of the Exodus. I'm here to tell you that this attitude is wrong. The Exodus did take place, and its effects on every part of the Jewish religion and ancient Egypt and Greece, in my opinion, are the foundations of why we should understand that the event did occur. My first novel, called Tainted Hands, discusses how the Exodus itself affected Moses. Moses was not allowed to cross over the Jordan River into the Promised Land after leading the Hebrews through the wilderness for 40 years. The Bible says it's because he struck a rock to provide water rather than speak to a rock as instructed by God. I cannot accept that version of the story. But what I can say is that, in my opinion, Moses was not allowed to cross over into the Promised Land because his hands were tainted with the blood of over 40,000 Hebrews that were killed during the Exodus for their refusal to follow the mandates of the Mosaic Code. This is all in biblical words. It's right there if you want to read it. And it turns out that in having to follow the instructions of the Lord, Moses turned out to be the first recorded Jew in history to take the life of a fellow Jew. This goes against the fifth commandment that says you cannot take the life of another human being. The reason I believe this was the reason Moses was not allowed to cross into the Promised Land was because years later, King David, when given instructions to build the first temple, was not allowed to be the person constructing the temple, and instead had to give the job to his son, King Solomon, because as the Bible says in 1 Chronicles, his hands were tainted with blood. It was from the killings that he was forced to do in his rise to power as king. This therefore explains why Moses, despite his pleadings, was not allowed to cross into the Promised Land. The Exodus also, however, significantly affected the history of Egypt. There is not agreement on when the Exodus took place, if it did, but in my opinion, it took place during the reign of the Pharaoh Amenhotep III. And the reason I say that is, in the 10 plagues that were sent upon Egypt, the next to last plague was when the sun did not shine in Egypt for 3 days, despite shining in Goshen during that entire period of time. Goshen was where the Hebrew slaves lived. The son of Amenhotep III, a man named Amenhotep IV, in my opinion, was so impressed by this that he believed his beloved sun god Aten was mad at Egypt because they did not restrict worship to Aten alone like the Jews did. When his father died and he took over as Pharaoh, he changed his name to Akhenaten and demanded that all of Egypt attempt to worship Aten alone, becoming, according to some pundits, the first monotheist in the world. Sigmund Freud, the famous psychiatrist, among many others, have claimed that Moses learned of monotheism from Akhenaten. But in my opinion, this is wrong. Rather, Akhenaten learned of what the power of a monotheistic God is because he was alive at the time the Exodus took place. I also believe ancient Greece took much information from the Exodus, and they got this information because during the killings, a number of Hebrews did not want to change their way of worshiping because Moses was telling them to in the Mosaic Code. They wanted to continue to worship the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, in the fashion they had for generations. But they saw their lives were at great risk. And so instead of staying with the Exodus, they emigrated to Greece, which was then Mycenae, before the Trojan War, and became immersed in society. They helped build the walls of the city, and they brought over their oral legends, which became incorporated into the developing Greek mythology. In particular is the story of the attempted sacrifice of Isaac by Abraham. In my opinion, this is what led to the story of the sacrifice of Iphigenia by the Greek general Agamemnon in order for the Greeks to sail away to the Trojan War. In all of history, only 2 societies elevated the possible act of infanticide to something worthy of indicating that your allegiance to God is that important. It's the ancient Hebrews and Greeks. That could have not happened independently. And in my opinion, it happened because certain Hebrew dissidents left the Exodus and became part of developing Greek society before the Trojan War. We may not yet have archaeologic proof that the Exodus took place, but I believe that the historical record with the things that I've just mentioned both indicate that the Exodus was a real event, and in addition indicate that the stories of the Bible were very important in what happened to both ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. If you're interested in my books, please read them. If you would like me to come and talk to you, I'm available. Please email me at larrymilner@mediahooks.com. That's larrymilner@mediahooks.com. Thank you very much.